Civil servants, that is what they do. They go from 1 minute working for one political party to the next working for another. So Sue Gray is nobody until this moment in time. Nobody across the political spectrum has questioned Sue Gray's independence, her impartiality, and that she is an extremely effective civil servant.
Many Conservative MPs are said to be furious after Labour leader Keir Starmer said he was delighted Sue Gray had agreed to become his Chief of Staff. Lucy Powell is Shadow Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, and she joins us now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Callum.
Great to speak to you. Boris Johnson says Sue Gray's appointment shows that the Partygate scandal was manufactured to bring him down. To what extent was he stitched up?
Well, I think that's just a ludicrous claim by Boris Johnson and stands in stark contrast to what he said at the time the report was published and all the while that the report and the investigation was taking place, when the Prime Minister and indeed the rest of the Conservative government were at pains to tell the country how independent and impartial and how formidable Sue Gray was as a civil servant, which she absolutely was. And in fact, when she published her report, Boris Johnson said that this vindicated him, which, you know, we could all have a different opinion about that. But he then, on the back of that report, also sacked a number of his senior aides. The police investigated these allegations and issued a large number of fines to both the Prime Minister and those that worked around him. So I think this is a really kind of ludicrous suggestion and looking for things to cling to sort of vindicate himself further, when actually what happened was he was the Prime Minister and the guy in charge of Number 10 when there was industrial scale COVID rule breaking going on, and he did nothing about it.
Let me put this to you, which has been reported by the Mail on Sunday's Dan Hodges. He quotes a minister as saying, "At the start of this week, Sue Gray was sitting in a meeting with every cabinet minister in which the most sensitive details about the government's EU negotiations were discussed. 3 days later, she pops up working for Keir Starmer. It's a disgrace." Can you understand why some might argue that this is a bit of a bad look, actually?
Well, of course, she's not yet working for Keir Starmer, and that appointment will be subject to the advisory committee on business appointments, and she will abide by the recommendations of that committee, which often includes a period of gardening leave. When
how long should that period be, do you think, for this to be appropriate?
That's not for me to decide. There is that independent process which she and Keir Starmer and the Labour Party will, of course, abide by whatever they find. But of course, civil servants, by their very nature, when there is a change of government that does happen, sometimes not happened that much recently, but in other times it has, a change of Prime Minister, change of government. Civil servants, that is what they do. They go from 1 minute working for one political party to the next working for another. So Sue Gray is nobody until this moment in time. Nobody across the political spectrum has questioned Sue Gray's independence, her impartiality, and that she is an extremely effective civil servant. Keir Starmer has made no secret of the fact that what he's been looking for these last stages ahead of a general election is somebody that can come and help him get ready should we win the next election for what happens after that. He's got big ideas about how he wants to change the way that government operates, how it works, devolving huge powers to the rest of the country and reorienting government towards missions that he's been setting out. And he needs someone to help him over the next year or so to really get ready for what will be quite a radical shift should we win the next election. And the role that Sue will be doing is entirely separate from our election operation, which is really formidable now and is being led by Morgan McSweeney and Shabana Mahmood. And that's where we do all of our communications, our so-called attack and rebuttal, and all of our election work. That's a separate task to the task that Sue is hopefully going to come and join the Labour Party to help us with, which is getting ready so that we can actually change the way government works.
Okay, understood. Now, one of the things that's perhaps slightly confusing in all of this is the statement issued by the Labour Party, which says the Labour Party has offered Sue Gray the role of Chief of Staff. We understand she hopes to accept the role, subject to the normal procedures. Keir Starmer is delighted, etc. Is there an outstanding question here about her acceptance of the appointment with Keir Starmer and when she's notified ACOBA, the appointment watchdog? Are you clear on the timeline of this?
Well, what I know is that she can't, in fact, be appointed, and she won't want to be appointed. Well, I assume that's on the basis of which she's resigned from the civil service with a view to taking up this role. Absolutely, that she has been offered, but that appointment itself is subject to this process. There is this independent process that not all people, former cabinet ministers and others, have abided by, which is an independent process that makes recommendations for how you can proceed to the job that you're looking to do after a time in government. But Sue Gray and Keir Starmer have been really clear that they will abide by the ruling of that committee, whatever it recommends.
I've just got one more brief one on Sue Gray, and then I know that you're the MP for Manchester Central as well, and I do want to ask you about the Arena inquiry, so forgive me. But I just want to ask, Sue Gray, you drew a comparison a moment ago where you sort of suggested that civil servants moving from one job to the other is standard practice. Now, that may be the case, but what is different here is that Sue Gray is moving from the civil service to a political appointment as a chief of staff to the leader of the opposition. She's going from one of the most senior roles in government, where she was overseeing ministerial appointments, conflict of interest, the dirt, basically, to say it frankly. I suppose, is that one of the main attractions, actually, of her CV, that she comes armed with that information?
Absolutely not. And of course, there's no suggestion whatsoever that Sue would reveal any of that information, because
do you promise then to pin her to that?
She's been party to that sort of information for successive governments of different colours, different prime ministers. You know, in the room one minute with Liz Truss, in the room the next minute with Rishi Sunak or Boris Johnson or Theresa May, or before that with Gordon Brown, the last Labour prime minister. There's no suggestion whatsoever that Sue Gray, or in fact any other senior civil servant, breaks the confidence of
and you won't
that
ask her to.
The
Labour Party wouldn't use that information.
Coming in to do. Absolutely not. That's not what she's coming in to do. She's coming in to help us get ready so that if we win the next election, which is a big if we win the next election, we can be ready to deliver the kind of transformational government that will change people's lives, which is what Keir Starmer wants to do.
And just finally, I know time is against us, and I apologise for that, Lucy, but I do just want your reflections on the apology that's been issued by MI5, by the boss of MI5, saying they're profoundly sorry for not stopping the attack on the Manchester Arena. I mean, it is quite remarkable to have an apology in this way. Does that help? Does this conclude matters as far as you're concerned?
Well, I'm sure it is of some comfort to the families of those who lost lives and all of those families of those who are still suffering with physical and mental trauma from this attack. But the final report from Sir John Saunders would make for incredibly difficult reading for those families who remain in the hearts of all Mancunians and those of us in Manchester. It's been a very difficult process to come to terms with, that there were significant missed opportunities, and as the previous reports found, that there were failings in how the attack was responded to, and that is incredibly difficult for families to come to terms with. But I know that they will want to know that those findings are now really acted upon, and that we don't just learn the lessons, but we make sure that things like this can't happen again in the future.
Lucy Powell, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you.
That is Lucy Powell from the Labour Party, Shadow Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport.